Hello everyone, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, The Path to Successful Robotic Automation. My name is David Goodstein and I'm a Member Services Coordinator for the Institute for Robotic Process Automation and Artificial Intelligence. It is our pleasure to be the co-host of today's event with EdgeVerb and Constellation Research. We encourage you at any time to submit your questions to today's speakers. To do so, please click on the questions box and type your question in the space provided. We will also be doing a poll question, so we ask that you please participate and choose from the options provided. Today's webinar will be recorded and you'll receive a follow-up email with the link to the recorded webinar. It will also be available on our website at irpaai.com. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to our moderator, Dan Goodstein. Dan?
Thank you, David. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are dialing in from today. I'm Dan Goodstein. I head up the media and events business here at IRPA-AI, as well as our sister organization, the Outsourcing Institute. And I have the pleasure of being the moderator today for today's webinar, The Path to Successful Robotic Automation, sponsored by EdgeVerb. And I like this topic in particular because more and more as I speak to my members, people are starting to kind of understand and realize that this is truly a journey. And in order to be successful on that journey, you got to kind of outline the right path. So I'm interested in hearing from our speakers on their perspectives and experiences. Real quickly, for those of you who don't know IRPA-AI, we are a professional association focused on all things automation, including robotic process automation, intelligent automation, and AI and cognitive solutions. Our goal is to be a resource, a recommender, and a connector for anybody in the space. And we do that primarily through events, content, and other forums. So, if you're looking to buy these types of services, you can come to us to learn and meet potential resources. And if you're here selling those types of services, we have a variety of ways for you to promote yourselves. So before we jump in, I want to quickly introduce our speakers and give them an opportunity to really talk about their backgrounds very quickly here before we jump in. I'm joined here today by Naresh Kathari from EdgeVerb, as well as Alan Lepusky from Constellation Research. So Naresh, maybe you can go first and give everybody a little bit of your background.
Thank you, Dan. Hi, good morning, good afternoon, all. This is Naresh Kathari here. I am with Infosys and responsible for automation solutions for multiple verticals as well as different business processes. Have been in this space for almost a decade now and have seen several successful implementations and significant savings from automation.
Thank you, Naresh. Thanks for being here. And Alan?
Hi, everyone. This is Alan Lepusky. Dan, thank you very much and for the introduction. And Naresh, looking forward to speaking with you today. I've been dealing with sort of the human elements of employees for around the last 20 years. At Constellation Research, I'm focused on what we call the future of work, always keeping up with what the trends and technologies are, processes and culture that impact the way employees are going to face their day-to-day work. How do they get their jobs done as individuals? How do they work together as teams around collaboration? And so I'm excited to sort of today talk about where automation, workflow, artificial intelligence, and all of these things fit in, hopefully demystify a few things, and hopefully get you all excited about what the future of your jobs look like.
Thank you, Alan. So we're going to, we do have some time at the back end of the webinar for some Q&A, but the speakers have both agreed to take some questions during the conversation, during the webinar here as well. So if you have something kind of relevant to what you're seeing, please go ahead and send it through. And if we don't get to them all, I'm sure we won't get to them all during the session. We'll, of course, address them in the last 15 minutes during the Q&A. So with that, Alan, I think I'm going to hand it to you to get us started.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is the role that digital assistants and automation and workflow have on the future of work. So if we move to the next slide, I'm going to start with the premise that is something that each of you is probably feeling very strongly, is this concept that we're all overloaded. We're overburdened. We're challenged and struggled at work each and every day. The more companies and executives that Constellation Research polls and we speak with, it's a very common thread going through that employees have a lot of things that they're struggling with. And so we're going to take a look at two of the main things that are causing this sort of struggle and then focus on how we can solve them. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see that problem number one is we're dealing with too much information. We're living in a society where so much information is being generated that it's impossible for people to keep up. It's not just the amount of information, but it's also the quality of the information. So it's not just that we're getting everything and we can't consume it. It's knowing what's right, knowing what's consistent, knowing what meets the regulations that we have to follow, knowing what's accurate. So both the quality and the quantity of information is something that is causing us a great deal of stress in our jobs. It's the mixture of our personal life, it's the mixture of our work life, it's all of these different sources coming together. So if we go to the next slide, the issue is not just standalone that we get too much information. It's very common for people to say, we have email overload, or I have too much in my social networks. Well, that's easy. If you're struggling with too much information coming in, too many contracts, too much information, there's the delete key. We can always deal with too much information. The problem starts to happen is that we have too many sources. We have to check too many places and bifurcate our information into too many channels. And that becomes a problem because we start to struggle with the context around the information that we're dealing with. We start to have disconnects between the relationships between the people that are creating that content and the conversations that are taking place with that content. So it's that combination of too much information coming at us from too many places that is really causing a lot of the struggle that employees are facing every day. But if we go to the next slide, we'll be rewarded knowing Alan isn't just painting a picture of doom and gloom, the fact that these problems can be solved. That's the beauty. And looking at it from an analyst perspective and polling the market and looking what's happening out there is important to help solve these. So if we go to the next slide, it's going to be a little bit of an eye chart. I don't expect any of you to sort of memorize what we're looking at here, but what it is a framework for how we're looking at Constellation, at what is impacting the business that you're each in today, and how does it impact productivity and employee collaboration. And so I don't want you to memorize all the dots. What I want you to think of is big quadrants on this as the way we break down what's happening in the industry and what's happening in the market. We look at things that cause just a little bit of change. So things that are sort of improving the way your employees can work and the success of your company. This is the horizontal axis. Sorry, I should make that clear. And as we go from incremental, we then look at things that transform work, things that completely sort of redefine business processes and allow your companies and your individuals to move forward towards success. And then off on the right-hand side, we have things that are exponential. These are game changers. These are things that completely, usurp business models and change the way organizations do work. Horizontally, what we have is the adoption of these technologies. At the bottom, we have things that are in use by everybody. In the middle, we have those ones that are starting to gain ground. And then at the top, we have the bleeding edge. So if you think of these in big quadrants, think way down at the bottom left. Blogs and wikis and email and these things are not dramatically changing the way your company does business. Up in the top right-hand corner, we have futuristic technologies like autonomous transportation and virtual reality and digital identities that are going to change the way you interact both with your colleagues, your customers, even your competition. What we want to focus on is sort of that sweet spot right in the middle. So if you go to the next slide, I'll help you focus down the view a little bit here and show you where RPA sort of fits in. We believe that it is transformational because this is going to impact so many of your business processes. And we're going to take a look at what some of those are, but it falls squarely into that middle section of transformational, which is exciting because it's the place you want to be with your businesses. Exponential is great, but very few people are sort of ready for that cutting edge. Incremental, you don't want to be spending the money on. You want to be focusing on these areas that are transformational. We also find that RPA is certainly not mainstream yet. It's not something in use by everybody, but it's also in this wonderful spot where it's just starting to move from bleeding edge 2 or 3 years ago, the earliest adopters, to starting to become something that people are looking at. And so hopefully each of your organizations on this call today, you feel that that's where RPA sort of fits in for you. It's something that is going to absolutely impact your employees and the business processes that you're doing. And you wouldn't be on this call today if you weren't excited and an adopter of getting into that technology. So let's move to the next slide and talk about the impacts that this is going to have. Now, it's hard to go anywhere these days without reading or hearing about AI, right? This is all that the news wants to talk about in the tech journals and everything. But I want you to think a little bit differently about AI today, at least at the start of the conversation. If you progress the slide a little bit, you're going to see that AI actually in this context does not stand for artificial intelligence, not yet anyway. It stands for augmenting. And why this is important is because my focus is on helping your employees, helping individuals and teams collaborate, get more work done, engage with your customers, engage with your prospects. So what are we augmenting? Let's build the slide a little bit more. We're augmenting the information that we have access to. So the tools that we are using and that we're moving forward with in the future of work are ones that are going to provide us extra contextual information about what we're doing. If we're dealing with people and contracts, we're going to find out all the information about them. We're going to know who those customers are. We're going to know the interactions that we've had with them. If we're dealing with people, we're going to know our contacts and our relationships with them and when we first met them and the times that we've had in common. So the tools are going to augment the information that is at our disposal, which leads to the next build on this slide, is that it's going to improve the way we interact with people. If I have more information about a client or a prospect, or if I have more information about that customer or one of my competitors, that information leads me to having a better interaction. For example, just a half hour before this call started, the panelists and I were all chatting not specifically about this topic, but about our personal lives. And it's wonderful to start to build that extra set of information around the ability to then, start to have a conversation with people. That's the way humans work. So will our tools be able to augment us to improve those interactions? The next level is, once you have those better interactions, and if we build the slide one more, is we start to have better insights. We start to find the trends and the patterns that are constantly occurring. And these are the things that can help us streamline, improve consistency, improve price, all sorts of things, accuracy, and we're going to get into all those. But it's going to augment the insights that we have. And then finally, in the last build, that improves the impact that we can have. Now, another word for impact could be results, but as an analyst, we have to iterate all the I's on this slide. So I'm going with the word impact, but augmenting the impact that we can have, more successful contract negotiations, more successful data entry, more successful call center times, all of those things. So think about AI for the next few minutes as augmenting our ability to get work done. So let's move to the next slide and focus on, what is workflow and RPA and AI going to do to help people get work done? This is the core focus. If we take the marketing out of it and we take the, looking at what's happening in the industry out, for you, what really matters is how are we going to help people get work done? So let's look at a few of the main tenets, the main attributes that RPA and workflow and AI are going to give to you. If we move to the next one, it's all about modernizing and improving the business processes that you have in place. So we want to start with taking the things that are causing workers a lot of time today and looking at how can we take the data entry aspects, the pattern recognition, the consistency and the compliance of all those things and modernize it. But we also want to take a look at what brand new processes can be created by moving to an automation type of system. We don't want to just take the things we've always been doing in the past and moving them to the computer. That's just digitizing. That's not digital transformation. That's just digital. So we're going to take a look at both type of things that you can do. So moving to the next slide, the first thing that RPA and AI are going to help you enable is automating repetitive tasks. This is one of the largest time wasters that employees have. So if the tools can help you, A, identify the tasks that are being repetitive, and B, create the workflows that will allow those things to be automated, and C, give you feedback on how those processes can be improved, then you're going to be able to automate the repetitive types of things. Moving to the next slide, one of the biggest areas we see is eliminating the pieces that don't have to be done. Now, in the last slide, I mentioned, the tools should be able to take a look at those processes. This is what I'm discussing here. This is the ability to eliminate the mundane tasks that you're doing. So people don't want to be robots. We're going to get into in a future slide where humans are involved and where robots are involved. But this eliminating the mundane frees people up to work on the things that are more important about building relationships, about creativity, about exceptions to the rules. People don't want to be doing mundane, repetitive tasks. Let's move to the next slide. One of the things that workflow can do and that computers are great at is reducing complexity. Computers don't have to think about all of the little attributes that we put into making our decisions and our biased decisions. Instead, they're able to look at these things, as algorithms, as formulas, and say, if we're able to take all of these different channels that are coming in, streamline them into one, and have the end user who's making the decision at the end not have to switch between multiple tools, not have to think about losing context. If the workflow system can bring things together from multiple channels and provide a seamless, integrated one view of a decision-making process or a workflow, then it's going to make my job far less complex. And that's one of the areas for me when I use these tools that it helps with the most. Moving on to the next slide, one of the things it does that's exciting is provide consistency. We all know that human error is one of the most costly things you can do in data entry and call centers and customer satisfaction. A slight typo can completely change the definition of an answer. It's interesting, the word not to the word now. One simple letter can cause something from saying you don't want to do something to wanting to do something immediately. So RPA and AI and workflow provide consistency. And where that consistency comes in is things like governance and compliance and customer satisfaction surveys and answers. And so consistency, very, very important part of the model. Moving to the next slide is also adding a layer of security. Again, human interaction is one of the things that we see causes the most problems. As you've been following in the news lately, most major data breaches occur because of human error, not because of the system breaking down or a fault in the software, or a fault in the process even, but it's in the humans that break those things down. So through AI and workflow automation, we can ensure that those processes are more consistent and more secure. Again, helping you out in areas of governance, compliance, data security, etc. Now, if we move to the next slide, one of the biggest trends that we're seeing happen, and there'll be more about this in Naresh's section when he gets into the details of what EdgeVerve is delivering, but we're seeing a big trend happening where RPA up until now and business process automation and workflows have been very specifically rule driven. We look at the processes that we follow for a loan application or an insurance claim, and we say, if X happens, then Y happens. But what we're starting to see is this beautiful ability now, if we move to the next slide, to use artificial intelligence, now AI actually does stand for artificial intelligence, to take a more holistic look at all of the scenarios that are occurring and allow your organizations to be less focused on changing workflows. Every time something new occurs, having to add a new rule, or when you have a new product, or when a new person is involved, or a new step in an application form, or a new call center thing comes up. Any of those used to have those workflows defined. Now, artificial intelligence is going to start to look at ways of creating those workflows without as much human interaction involved, freeing you up and giving you sort of the ability to handle more use cases easier, faster, and less expensive. So I want to spend a minute sort of explaining AI to those of you that are on the call that may be new to it. If we move to the next slide, in 3 minutes, we're not going to get a PhD in AI, but I want you to think about these things when you're hearing in the next section from EdgeVerve, or when you're dealing with other organizations or other vendors. When they start to talk about AI, these are the questions you want to ask them. These are the things you want to sort of understand about AI when it comes to the future of work. First thing that's needed is data sets. So where does the information come from that the algorithms use to make those decisions? Is that data set something that's generic? Is it a data pool that's shared by multiple organizations? Is it specific to your industry, your geography, the nomenclature that's used by, specifically your employees? So a training set for doctors is very different than a training set for lawyers. A data set for one call center and one geography may be different than another. So understanding where that information comes from, that AI can make those decisions. The second is computing power. The ability to create these data sets, the ability to go through that information requires massive amounts of computing power. So this is one of the major differences that's happened between the 1960s and 70s when we first started talking about artificial intelligence to why we're talking about it now in 2016, 17, and into 2018 is because almost unlimited computing power in the cloud. In the past, everyone had to have a Cray in their basement. Now you just pay a few dollars to whichever cloud provider you're using, and you have unlimited computing power. The third aspect that powers artificial intelligence is the algorithms. So you have the data and you have the computing power, but you have to have the science behind it. You have to have the right engineers, you have to have the right vendor of choice that understands your industry and can actually build the right formulas to figure out what to do with that data. The fourth element is time. One of the big things about artificial intelligence is that it learns and it gets better. So the faster that these things can occur and the faster you can begin using them, the more feedback loops that will be fed into it and the better that algorithm will get. You want to outpace your competition here. You want to make sure to start early and you want to make sure that these things happen quickly. And finally, the user experience. This is all fun and games and wonderful, and it's a great marketing message, but unless it manifests itself in ways that your employees can use and that data is accessible and that it provides insights into it, not everyone has data scientists to just look at a big set of numbers. You want to have that user experience in your products actually surface things to you, make recommendations, make insights, and show you the patterns and trends. All right, so moving on to the next slide. I want to very quickly kind of explain where do we actually see artificial intelligence manifesting itself? Well, the first thing we see is in vision. So things like looking at photographs, looking at images, looking at product catalogs, looking at parts that are broken in a call center, call that comes in, an employee or a customer uploading an image of a part that needs to be fixed, or a picture of a car that happens in a car accident. We can now use AI to actually decipher what it's seeing on stage, order the right products, get the right solutions in place. Language APIs are the things that allow us to decipher information as we're speaking to it. So you're all probably very familiar with talking to your phone, whether you're using Google or Siri or Cortana or an Amazon Echo or a Google Home or all of these things. Natural language processing allows these new sort of interfaces for things. And it's really exciting to see where vendors are going with enabling people to not have to create those workflows or create a SQL query to actually dig out information, but instead be able to ask people, show me my top 3 prospects in the Northwest region, just like that, and have that information come back. Speech is able to decipher things like sentiment analysis. It's able to find out, are your customers happy? Are they angry? And then appropriately route those calls or route those answers based on that sort of feedback. And then finally, knowledge bases. The ability for AI to decipher the questions that are being asked and return information back to you. So again, that's a very quick overview of the 5 elements that are required for AI and 4 ways that AI can manifest themselves. I'd be happy to kind of go into any of those further with you afterwards or in the Q&A, but I want to move on and make sure you have lots of time for the great presentation that's coming up. So,
Alan, before you, this is Dan. Before you jump ahead, I'm curious. You alluded to some of the consumer-facing AI technologies that we're all used to or getting used to. What's your sense as to why some of that technology hasn't really bled into the enterprise world, at least at the not at the same pace?
Well, it's a great question. We always use the buzzword phrase, the consumerization of IT. Almost everything starts in our consumer lives. Social networking and mobile access to our email and our applications, they always then kind of work their way into work. And there's always a few factors that are in the way. Trust, cost, security, education, training, what do employees need to know about these things. But we are starting to see these things work their way in through profiles. You look at things that Infosys is doing with their Naya platform. You look at things that Google and Microsoft and IBM are doing with their platforms. And we are starting to see business applications start to use more automation, start to use more natural language processing. Everything from responding to emails to booking contracts to finding parts in a catalog. I think we're, again, if you went back to my framework slide and we talked about, early adopters and where things are before they become mainstream, this is just getting to that early adopter stage. And into 2018, 19, 20, this is going to be completely commonplace. People are going to be interacting with their software in brand new ways. And I often say the best artificial intelligence is the ones that you don't even know exist. It's like special effects in movies. You don't want to know that you did it. There shouldn't be an AI button. You should just be able to use your software and it should be more intelligent.
Yeah. I spoke to one of your research colleagues at another organization recently, and they kind of referred to this idea of kind of wide AI versus narrow AI. Do you kind of subscribe to that thought as well?
Well, certainly, and the analogy for those of you that don't follow the idea between wide AI and narrow AI is programming a computer to do everything versus programming an algorithm to do something very specific. And the analogy I use in the sports world is look at Michael Jordan, one of the greatest athletes on the entire planet, arguably top 3 basketball players of all time, couldn't hit a baseball. When he switched careers and went in and tried to be a baseball player, he couldn't do it. He was specialized in what he was able to do. And that same thing is going to happen. You're not going to use a platform that's trained to help doctors diagnose cancer to then have your lawyers find precedent for cases or your call center people find about claim applications. So narrow AI versus wide AI, hopefully that sort of makes some sense. Hopefully I was able to give you sort of a picture of what that means.
Yes, thank you.
All right, so I'm gonna quickly go through the last 2 slides here. One of my main points, and I'm not going to delve into this too much, but one of the things that automating and workflow and freeing up time can do, the beauty of it is enabling people to work on the things that humans are good at. This is my sort of segue slide into sort of the next slide where we're going to talk about when things should be human powered and when they should be AI powered. I want you to think of what the human element of your employees is. They are not just numbers. They are not just robots. They understand the people they're speaking to on the phone. They understand the relationships that they're building. They understand when a process should change or something new has happened, and they can make a recommendation to the company of here's a better way to do things. Your employees are your key asset that allow you to make your company better and the relationships with your customers better. And so we can talk about this in more detail in the Q&A, but I think it's really important when we're talking about algorithms and automation and AI to sort of leave you with this thought around humanity and creativity and relationship building. So I have a summary slide, if we go to the next slide, that hopefully kind of wraps up what I've talked about throughout the course of this 20 some odd minutes, is when you're thinking about when people are good at things and where your algorithms should come in, think about things that are repetitive, large amounts of data, how fast you have to do them, and the number of channels that come at you. Those are all things that computers are great at. The computer doesn't care if it's reading 10,000 product catalogs or 1. It can do it in milliseconds. People can't do that. So here are the areas that algorithms and RPA and workflow are going to be great at. And then the things that humans are great at are creativity, passion, relationship building, understanding the difference, deciphering when change should occur, making recommendations on improvements. And then also, we can't forget, there are times and places where people physically need to be there. They need to be there to actually handle that relationship. They need to see things in real life. They need to build and bond and all of those wonderful things. So hopefully, this chart gives you a good overview. The last chart I'm going to leave you at from an analyst market sort of perspective, if we move to the next slide, is how should you think about choosing your RPA vendor of choice? At Constellation Research, we monitor a dozen or so vendors that are creating these types of things. These are the facets that we sort of look at for deciding, how do they train their RPA? What are their strengths? What assets and benefits can they bring to you? We'll leave these for everyone at the end to sort of look at, and they can come back to. And I assume you're making these available afterwards to people, but these are the things I want you to think about. And as we segue into Naresh's slides, I think you're going to see that EdgeVerve and Infosys are providing a lot of these things. So we're about at the halfway point. I hope this has been informative and sort of set the stage for employees have a lot on their plate these days, despite whatever role they're in. We are moving to an era of software that is going to improve and enhance and augment their capabilities to get work done, while at the same time freeing them up to enhance and use their human aspects to make your organizations better. And with that, I will turn things over.
Thank you, Alan. No, that's very, very helpful, and I appreciate the breadth of the things that you talked about. I know you could go on for hours and hours, but before I hand it off to Naresh, I want to just kind of get an audience perspective and take a quick poll here. So the question is, what are the capabilities that you would like your RPA to extend into? And while they're doing that, Alan, I'm curious. You had that slide around the technology trends, that chart with a lot of different technologies on it. I'm curious as to beyond RPA and AI, is there another one or two things there that you're particularly excited about as it relates to this topic?
Sure. The thing that I think people should start to get excited about is we're talking right now about the visualization and the workflow of RPA and the machine learning and natural language processing, and all that is going to improve and speed up and secure and make your processes more consistent. The next stage is how are you going to visualize these things, and that's where augmented reality starts to come in. Long before virtual reality, we like to talk about virtual reality, but in the workplace, augmented reality is going to be far more common, and it's going to allow you to take these workflows and processes that you're creating and visualize them in completely new and enhanced ways. You're going to be able to look and decipher and find patterns and interact with customers and colleagues. I think, 1, 2, 3 years from now, sort of the marriage of RPA and augmented reality is going to make for some incredible workflow applications. And I'm excited to see, how end users are going to benefit from this.
Great. So it looks like the majority of the audience is kind of both of the above. So a combination of machine learning, AI, and cognitive automation, and then small percentage still saying RPA doesn't have a clear roadmap. So that's a good segue to you, Naresh. I'm sure you have some thoughts on that, and I'll hand it over to you at this point.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Alan. Alan, I personally like your example about Michael Jordan, that how wide AI and narrow AI should be differentiated, and why it is so important to apply the right technology and I would say the automation type for specific scenarios and not generalize. In fact, in my last, I have spent all of the 21st century building software solutions. And if I look back, almost all the software solutions were about automating work, whether it is building ERP solutions, ticketing solutions, case management systems, order management systems. They automated some parts of business functions. And then last 10 years in the robotic automation space, I have seen how these applications are being used by the actual users in large companies, and where is the potential to have more savings, make processes more efficient, and also accelerate some of the work that is being done on the software solutions that have been built over several decades. So I will provide insights into many such situations, scenarios in large companies and as well as other companies that how processes have been automated using robotic automation, and how we see the different processes at an organization level. So let me simplify the thought process in my next slide and how we see processes at an organization level. Now, we can I would say, categorize different processes in organizations based on several parameters. But if I have to just look from automation lens, there are just three categories of the processes which can be automated. One set of processes which are pretty rules driven, deterministic in nature, where the next steps are well documented. Users generally follow manuals or SOPs and go through a series of screens and applications and complete the task. These are also the processes which are more operational in nature, but if automated, it can provide immediate savings to any organization. These are also the processes which are also ripe where robotic automation can be applied. The next set of processes with respect to automation potential are the ones which are slightly complex in nature. But to your example, Alan, as well, that where you showed a shelf of books, right now a lot of information is out there in the computer systems. It's huge data, large volumes of information, data sets, and users constantly analyzing that information and trying to predict certain scenarios, building correlations. But with the advancements of in technology, big data, all of that can be automated as well. And this is where actually you see a lot of, I would say, a combination of RPA as well as AI coming into play to discover the processes, to predict models which can cause failures, and what are some of the false alarms that users should not spend time. Essentially, these processes are also kind of the right opportunities where you can apply the analytics and the predictive kinds of automation. And the next set of processes which are kind of very ad hoc in nature, but it does require experience from similar processes in the past, similar scenarios in the past, which are very knowledge driven as well, requires in-depth understanding of what could happen if a certain step is completed in various ways. But today, users complete these processes, but all the past learnings are generally either left with the users or documented somewhere. But with the advancements, we can apply cognitive automation here, which is also about self-learning and knowledge-driven maintenance. So overall, three types of processes, and the most important insights that we have seen from all of such processes across various industries is that 40 to 50% of the processes in any organization fall into the first category, which is very operational in nature, task-driven, and can be easily automated. Now, if I have to simplify the deterministic type of processes further, the next slide essentially shows what are the types of activities that are done in different functions. Overall, it is all about users logging into different applications, navigation across various screens, pulling up data, matching the data, correcting the data, and then just following the procedures which are out there. It's the same set of steps that the users are repeating. Many a times, copy paste, aggregation, and it is very manual in nature. And most important, these are all rules driven. There is no subjectivity involved for such processes. This is where RPA, the robotic process automation, can provide huge benefits to automate such processes which are cutting across various enterprise applications and sometimes even external applications, and provide immediate savings to any organization. And if I have to further provide an insight on the next step, the next slide essentially shows that when we look at RPA, what is the right approach towards end-to-end process automation. It is all about how the work is done by the various users in different functions. capture that user activity data. It could be already available in the form of various documents, manuals. Use that information to discover the right processes for automation. This activity about discovering the processes could be manual, or we can apply machine learning as well. This is all about identifying whether the processes would lend themselves for automation. And that automation could be using RPA, could be using AI, but essentially this discovery is very important so that right processes are identified. It goes back to the same example, narrow AI versus wide AI, that identifying the right processes for the right type of automation. And the third next logical step with respect to end-to-end automation would be, can we record and play all these automations by demonstration? And then once configured, deploy these processes which are then automated using software robots. And software robots are nothing but software programs that mimic the human actions exactly the way they are done today, but with 100% accuracy, with resiliency, robustness, as well as strictly complying with the business rules as per each process. So this is the overall structured approach that we recommend for any type of automation, which will provide significant, I would say, savings, not just when the process is automated, but also ensuring that the right processes are automated with this approach. And moving on to the next slide, what we see is that there are various capabilities that are required for this structured approach. And the first step with respect to discovering the automable processes is very important. And as I said, it could be a manual, it could be an automated process, but solutions are out there in the market. Edgeworth, we have a solution that helps capture all the keystrokes and the mouse clicks and identify potential automation opportunities. But the other key element to realize maximum savings is that once you have identified the processes for automation, what is the type of automation that would apply for specific processes? This is where, again, the differentiation needs to be made between narrow AI or wide AI, or what type of automation. And there are three broad categories of automations, even within RPA, that would be applicable across various processes. This is also the area which is many times forgotten by various, I would say, stakeholders in any organization, where the focus is just to look at processes which can be automated end to end. But at the same time, there are several processes which would require human intervention. But if that intervention is required only for one or two steps, then RPA can still improve the overall efficiencies, productivity of the users by providing the users automation on demand. So assisted automation, in our experience, in our view, and based on the success that we have seen in the last 10 years, is also one very important type of automation that should not be forgotten. In fact, 30 to 40% of all the automable processes, you would see that assisted automation could really help. And then there is the hybrid automation that can help for certain processes, which is also on demand, but it is more about automation as a service, which is very contextual and which not only provides different combinations of assisted as well as unassisted automation, but can help accelerate the entire deployment as well as process completions for multiple business functions. And what we see today is that when all these different types of automations are built, the natural next step towards providing end-to-end automation for the end customer would be the intelligent chatbots, which do bring in natural language processing, more context, can engage with the customer. Again, it is very important that these chatbots are also deployed for very specific use cases, very specific scenarios. Just to give you an example, that in case like if you're planning to deploy chatbots in the banking world, it is very important that what types of queries can be answered by chatbot and not something where the customer needs to know beyond those specific queries. So these are essentially the building blocks for deterministic automation. And I would say a couple of important points again to summarize, that discovery of the automable processes and assisted automation are the two most important steps that should be taken into account while building automations using RPA. Moving on to the next slide, I would also like to share a few examples of how automations can be applied at various layers of a process stack. This is more of a technology view than a business process view, but the important point here is that automation can be applied at various levels in the entire process. There are automations which can be applied even at infrastructure level, automating certain fixes within the infrastructure, allocating disk space, predicting disk failures, even at application deployment management and like testing of various scenarios. Automation can be applied where a lot of manual work is automated, and many times it is also rules driven. So RPA would also be a good automation that can be applied here. And then, of course, we have already discussed that how automation can help business processes and deliver significant savings. And then can we move on to the next slide? Yeah. So many times when we get into conversations with stakeholders in different companies, the most important point is about, yes, we want to automate, but what are the processes that we would like to pick up first and prove out the technology? And there are two choices. One choice, pick up a process which is on the IT side. It could be maintenance of the applications, maintenance of the infrastructure, or resolving certain service tickets. Of course, these can be automated based on the complexity. Many times, the structured ones are the areas where robotics can provide significant savings and value. And the more complex one with a lot of unstructured data, large volumes of data, there again, we need to use machine learning as well as AI algorithms. But the important point here is that when you are starting your journey for realizing savings as well as having impact on the customer experience as well, you should start with the right processes on the business function side. This has a very direct impact on the customer experience, customer service, as well as providing significant savings and value to the organization. Processes, when automated, they also reduce the amount of mistakes that are made and can help not just improve the overall KPIs, whether it is reduce cycle times, but also help reduce the revenue leakages in certain examples, improve cash flows, and thereby provide many savings with different kinds of automation. So efficiency, reliability, and experiencing growth These all can have a significant improvement when the processes on the business side are identified for RPA automation. And if I have to provide a bird's eye view of all the processes, that is the one coming on the next slide, is that what are the various processes that have been automated in different industries. While you see a list of 2 or 3 processes across various industry, I would say the top 3 across all of the industry are customer service and multiple processes in customer service. The second one is finance and accounting. We see that there are processes which are common across industries. And the third one is, of course, the HR operations. But whether it is telecom, where order to activation, service assurance, banking, a lot of processes on the customer service side, chargeback side, good candidates for automation. Insurance and healthcare, a lot of processes with claims and policy administration. Those can be automated, and we have, in fact, delivered a lot of savings by automating such processes. And of course, the other industries which you see out there on the slide, many processes have been automated with significant savings. And here is a more deep view on each of those industries in the next slide. Of course, these are at 40,000 level, but the potential of automation across various processes is ranging from 30% to 70%. So Dan, if you can move on to the next slide, which provides a view into different types of sub-processes. And one common thing that you'll notice is the pillar on the very far right-hand side. The service desk, HR operations, payroll, benefits administration, travel and expense, onboarding, IT service desk. These are the ones that provide savings for all the industries. And of course, very specific industries, the customer service and finance and accounting are the ones that I already spoke about. I will not go into depth with each of those sub-functions, but please feel free to reach out to me in case, like, if you'd like to know more details about any process that has been automated, how it was automated, and what was the savings that was realized by our customers.
Yeah, and Naresh, this is Dan. Just a quick time check. We've got about 10 minutes left, and there's some questions coming in, but I want to just give you a heads up so you have an opportunity to wrap up as well.
Sure, Dan. So then, now we spoke about the various processes, what are the categories of processes, the types of automations, how to start automation, the right approach towards automation. I would now like to provide a quick insights or information about automations that we have delivered. Dan, if you can move on to the next slide, please. Okay. As I mentioned, I am with Infosys. I started my career with Infosys in 2000, and we are one of the leading software services company, over $10 billion in revenues. But while we provide lots of, I would say, software solutions and consulting services to our customers, we invest heavily in building enterprise products. And EdgeVerve is a subsidiary of Infosys, where we incubate all of the enterprise products that we offer to our customers. And the product for automation that EdgeVerve provides is called Assist Edge. And Assist Edge has been there for almost 9 years now, since 2008 when we started offering to our customers. And over 100 customers today who have realized significant savings. So Dan, if you can move on to the next slide, please. It is an end-to-end automation platform for robotic automation. We do have a larger platform that also provides AI-based and machine learning-based automation solutions. But with respect to robotic automation, the end-to-end platform does provide the capabilities to identify the right processes for automation it provides capabilities to drive and deploy right types of automations, whether it is on-demand automation or end-to-end automations. And as you see some of the metrics on the right-hand side, significant benefits delivered, in fact, over $3 billion in measured savings delivered to our customers. We don't track the count of robots that have been deployed because many of them are at enterprise level, but in general, over 75 million transactions that are automated by Assistage on a monthly basis. So Dan, I know that we have 5 more minutes. We can take a few questions from the audience now.
No, thank you, Naresh, and appreciate it. I know it's tough to get all that content in, both you and Alan, in 20 minutes. So thanks for doing that. So let's just jump right into questions. I've got a few coming in, and I'm going to try to combine a couple that are related. So Alan, maybe I'll go to you first. I'm getting a lot of questions around just definitions. So let me see if I can kind of combine 2 of these questions. So the first one is around the differences between cognitive automation and machine learning and AI, and the other is the difference between smart process automation and robotic process automation. So maybe a quick survey of the differences.
Sure. It's $1 million question. So whoever was asking, you're not alone. A lot of it is marketing, but let me try to give a non-PhD answer. The larger overarching field we're looking at is artificial intelligence. There are many subsets of what takes place in artificial intelligence. You're going to hear things like machine learning, which is about how we start to train the algorithms. There's different ways that machine learning takes place, things like neural nets, and then you hear about deep learning, instructed education, non-instructed. So in the industry, you're going to hear a lot about how do you train machine learning. That basically means how do the algorithms learn to do the things that you're being asked to do them. Cognitive computing is essentially a marketing term around artificial intelligence, referring to how do computers do things emulating the way the human mind does them. From an analyst perspective, and again, to try to keep the answer short, one of the things I want you to leave here with is no matter what it is called, it's a little bit limiting to think about artificial intelligence as only trying to catch up to what we can do. We actually want machines to start to be able to do things that we cannot do. So think about it again from a very simple analogy. Cameras can do things that our eyes can't do. I can't see an infrared. I can't see an X-ray spectrums. So it's very easy to quickly get an analogy of things that robotic eyes can do that human eyes can't. I want us to reach the level where our software can also do things that we can't do. So don't just limit yourself to thinking about, how can software emulate the things that humans can do? That's my little rant on that topic.
Naresh, anything you would add or challenge there? And maybe a related question is, are you seeing any success stories right now with kind of coupling things like AI and RPA?
Oh yes, I agree with Alan as well. In fact, in the enterprise world, we see several processes that naturally extend from RPA to AI, because while there are many processes which are rules-driven, there are a significant amount of processes. Just to give you an example, that in insurance and the healthcare world, where machine learning and AI can be applied to automate claims processing as well.
No, thank you. So here's a good one. So this person asks, one of the areas of concern is the Office of Finance, right, which has responsibility for financial reporting across the enterprise, budgeting, planning. Are there any examples or case studies of how RPA can be applied in this area, Naresh?
Yes. So what we have seen is that in finance and accounting, there are essentially I would say 2 opportunities. One is, of course, the processes which are rules-driven, processes like reconciliation, where RPA can be deployed and the data can be reconciled on a daily, weekly, or a monthly basis, and reporting can be automated. And the second example, which is a very interesting example that I would like to share, is that for many large retail companies, There is a team which does financial planning and forecasting for various business functions on a monthly basis. The challenge there is that while that team is supposed to spend most of their time in analyzing the historical past data and then doing the right planning, 70% of the time they are just collecting the data at the start of the month. This is where RPA can significantly improve the overall bandwidth that is available to this team, whereby the data can be retrieved automatically by RPA from multiple sources. It can all be aggregated, presented back to the analyst, and so that instead of having just 30% of their monthly time, now they are able to give 90% of their monthly time to the right areas, which can ultimately improve the accuracy and the forecasting for those organizations. And the most important other point to note here is that when we talk of RPA, these are all virtual users. So any action that is done by RPA is still tied back to the virtual user ID. So in terms of compliances and other regulatory needs, those are also automatically taken care of.
So we have time for maybe one or two more, and apologize to everyone. We ran over here a bit, but I want to get a couple of these questions answered, and if we don't get to them all, we'll make sure to follow up with you. Maybe for you, Alan. So the question is, when we use prediction models for taking intelligent actions in business process, shouldn't we need 100% accuracy for prediction models? How do you achieve that?
Well, again, it goes back to the data sets and the history of what's being put into it. It's the combination of having enough information to make those decisions and then having the algorithms and the narrow focused knowledge to allow that to occur. Each company should be able to tune those prediction algorithms on their own as well. So as you see those results, it is going to get better over time. I think it's currently an overestimation to say that they are going to be achieving 100% accuracy. And that's why at this stage, a lot of this results in recommendations, not in automated actions. A lot of these times we have to actually think about what is the end result of some of these tools. And today, perhaps, you're not going to want your doctor to be able to, a robot's not going to replace your doctor, but it may make some suggestions. Same thing in prediction models for sales and distribution and supply chain channeling. It may not make the final decision, but it should augment the human's ability and give them information based on recommendations. That was hopefully a quick answer.
Yeah, thank you. I know it's a much deeper one, right? But all right, another one, Naresh. So someone's asking about a percentage of potential savings for the insurance sector in particular. Any sense of numbers or maybe even a range?
Yeah, it would vary based on the business function and based on the current, I would say, the environment and how the processes are being done today. But across the many processes that we have automated, the range would be 30% to 70%.
Right. So, Alan, I'm going to give the last one to you because it's kind of a forward-thinking type of one. And again, for everybody on the webinar still, thanks for hanging with us, and we'll get all these questions answered. I think we may even have some additional webinars coming in the next couple months to kind of continue this particular conversation. But so look forward a little bit, Alan. As AI becomes more mainstream, and this will inevitably displace some resources. What's your suggestion as to where those resources are reallocated within the organization, right?
Well, I think the people that are in those job roles need to start thinking about the downstream effects of what their job does. If you're in call center, then you are actually an expert in some of the processes and the products that are being made. If you're in insurance claims, then you understand, the relationships that your customer is building. So if you think part of your job is going to be taken away, what are the downstream effects and the values that you can bring to your company based on the knowledge that you the expert to train those systems to learn your job? Now, I know it sounds counterintuitive to say, I want to teach the AI how to take my job away from me, but it is actually important that you know how to perform those actions. And that may be an area of skill for you that you can then extend out into other areas. So again, you have to keep up with the times. You have to know where your skill sets are and focus on the things humans are good at. Focus on, again, the exceptions to those rules and the creative parts of the processes. Again, apologize.
Great.
A quick answer to a complicated question.
No, well, obviously there's a lot of interest and questions breed questions, right? So we'll continue this conversation. There are a lot of questions that we didn't get to, so I think it's worthy of another session. So we'll get information to everybody on when that will be. But Alan, Naresh, thank you so much for your time. This has been wonderful. And very quickly, for those of you who are looking for more, we have our Automation Innovation Conference. Naresh and the folks from EdgeVerve will be there. They're one of our key sponsors for this event in New York on December 5th and in London on December 13th. And the next webinar on this topic on digital transformation will be on November 29th. Thanks, everybody, for joining, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.